Hello and welcome to the video about your rental agreement. The purpose of this video is to help give you a better understanding of your rental agreement as well as what you can expect from us as your property manager and what we expect from you as the resident. Now, I'm not going to read the entire terms and conditions of this rental agreement word for word, but I am going to go over and discuss the major points of each section. So let's get started. Here's the first page of your rental agreement. Here we have the date, the residents' names, the property you'll be renting, the head of household's contact information, our office's address, and our property manager's email. Here is the lease start and ending dates. If you're on a month-to-month lease, this box will be checked and the start date will be indicated here. The amount of the potential increase is $300. This does not mean your rent will increase this much once your lease expires. This just gives us some flexibility if we were to increase your rent once your lease is up. Here is your monthly stated rent amount and all other recurring fees that are due to our management company each month. We prefer that this total payment be submitted all together either by personal check or online. Here are the total security deposit and the amount that you paid upon move-in. And this section indicates what appliances are provided at the property for you. Over here we have the potential fees that could be acquired during your tenancy. The dishonored check fee could be applied if a check from you does not clear. The smoke alarm tampering fee is $250, which we will discuss in the next video. And here it states that your fee for any late rent payment is 10% of your rent. Down here it indicates what type of prorated rent amount we use when calculating the amounts owed upon move-in based on your lease start date. Down in this section, we will ask for the name and birth dates of any minors residing at the property. And on this side, we ask for any vehicle information of each resident. So that concludes page 1. Now we'll move on to page 2. So here we have page 2. This section again highlights the details of the smoke alarms and carbon monoxide alarms at the property. This section states that you will need to test them periodically during your tenancy to check that they work, and you are responsible for replacing any dead batteries as needed. It also restates that the $250 tampering fee should any working batteries be removed from these devices. In this next section, it goes over who is responsible for each utility bill at this particular property. And these boxes indicate who is responsible for maintaining any private yard included. If it is the resident's responsibility, you should pay special attention to section 11 of the rental agreement, which we will go over in a bit. The next section covers the pet policy at the property, what pets are allowed, if any, the renter's insurance requirements, which is $100,000 worth of coverage for apartments and $300,000 worth of coverage for condos, townhomes, and single-family properties. We will ask you to type in your renter's insurance company name and the policy number in these blanks here. Below that indicates the smoking of any substance is prohibited on the entire premises. This is our policy for all of our properties. The final line of this section indicates that the dwelling unit is located within a 100-year floodplain, and next to that should indicate your mailbox number if applicable. We will then ask for the dates and signatures from each member of the household and their emergency contact information. We only need to know their name and contact phone numbers. Your emergency contact should not be the other member of your household. The person to contact in the event of your death should be someone you trust with all of your personal belongings. And down here is where the leasing agent signs and dates after your move-in meeting. So now we're going to get into the terms and conditions of your rental agreement. Section 1 discusses how your rent is due on the first of the month, and a late fee will be charged if received after midnight on the 4th. It also states that we do not accept any partial rent payments, and we don't accept cash or any third-party payments either. We also do not accept multiple checks from one household, but if you're paying online, we do prefer that you have only one person submit the entire payment for the total amount owed. It also states that if a check does not clear, may require only certified funds for any future rent payments. This section also explains that your rent will not be increased within the first year if you are on a month-to-month lease. However, after the first year, you may increase your rent if you're on a month-to-month, and we will provide you with at least 90 days notice. Section 2 explains non-payment notices. Basically, if your rent payment is not received by the 8th of the month, we will issue a 72-hour non-payment notice, which will state that if your rent is not paid by a certain date, your rental agreement will be terminated. Section 3 goes over application of payments. Basically, any funds received from your household are first applied to any outstanding rent payment charges, then to any rent owed for the current month, then to any outstanding service charges owed to us. Then the funds would be applied to any late rent charges, and finally to any other fees, claims, or charges owed. This section also explains that we cannot deduct any non-compliance fees from any rent payment, which we will discuss in more detail later in this video. The next section goes over early terminations of tenancies. Basically, if you break your lease, we will charge you actual damages as a result, which continues on to page 3. This can result in quite a large range of charges, such as repayments of any concessions, like for example, if you receive 50% off your first month's rent, all advertising costs to re-rent the property, any concessions given to re-rent the property, the difference in rent if the replacement resident is paying a lower amount for the remainder of your lease term, and any damages caused to the premises during your tenancy. If you're ever in a situation where you have to break your lease, please contact our office as soon as possible so we can try to minimize these costs to you as much as possible. The next section on page 3 of your lease agreement discusses terminations of month-to-month tenancies. During the first year of your tenancy, you will be required to provide at least 30 days notice to vacate, but after the first year of occupancy on a month-to-month lease, at least 60 days notice to vacate needs to be provided to us. Below that, it discusses conversions to fixed term tenancies, meaning that your lease will automatically go month to month after your initial lease term expires unless we make another offer within 90 days of your current lease expiring. Section 7 goes over the policy regarding pets, waterbeds, and musical instruments. Basically, none of these are allowed without prior authorization from the management. In general, we are fine with musical instruments as long as you're being conscientious of your neighbors, but no pets are allowed without signing a pet agreement. This also goes for any companion or service animals. In Section 8, it discusses occupants. This emphasizes that the property is only to be used by those on this rental agreement. Guests are not allowed to stay on the premises for more than 10 consecutive days, or a total of 20 days over the course of a year without approval from us. They may also be required to be added to the lease as a resident if this happens. Section 9 states that subletting the property is prohibited without our permission. Below that goes over the care of the premises, emphasizing that all residents will keep the property clean and sanitary during their tenancy. Residents will not store any flammable materials or cause any other fire hazards or mold growth. It also states that you are required to report any water leakage, and you are responsible for minimizing the damage that could be caused until this issue is fixed. This section also states that you are responsible for replacing any batteries, light bulbs, and/or filters during your tenancy if necessary. Section 11 covers yard maintenance, which we touched on earlier in this video. This only applies to those who are responsible for maintaining any private yard during their lease term. This includes watering, mowing, edging, weeding, etc. If this is not done properly, we may charge you to have the yard serviced after 10 days written notice is given, so keep that in mind. Section 12 discusses winterization. During the colder months of the year, you are responsible for placing faucet covers over any exterior spigot lines that are on the outside of the property. You are also required to keep the heat set to at least 60 degrees or above during the winter months. And if you're renting a single-family home, you are also responsible for keeping the sidewalks free of snow and ice. In the next section, we go over barbecues and fire pits. Charcoal and propane barbecues are prohibited in any areas that do not have any overhead sprinkler. Electric or hibachi-style barbecues are allowed as long as they are kept away from buildings or hazardous materials. Fire pits are prohibited unless they are already at the property upon move-in. Section 14 discusses the changes to the premises during your tenancy. You are responsible for using all systems at the property in a reasonable manner. You are required to pay for and not disconnect any utilities at the property. Any major changes or additions to the premises are prohibited. And you are not allowed to tamper with or hang anything from fire safety systems, such as sprinklers. And satellites must be installed in compliance with the addendum enclosed and discussed in the next video. Section 15 goes over damages during your tenancy, which we will continue back at the top of page 3. All residents agree to not destroy any aspect of the property or allow anyone else to do so, otherwise they are liable for the damages. Section 16 discusses your security deposit. We will be providing you with a very detailed move-out instructions once you do give us your 30 days notice, but please keep in mind that your security deposit will be used to pay for the damages or any unusual wear or tear caused during your tenancy. We will also be using your security deposit to clean any carpets at the property if a cleaning receipt is not received from you upon move-out. You will be given your final accounting within 31 days of your vacate date. We also do not waive the right to add any additional charges after the 31 days should we find any additional damages after we have sent the final accounting. If your security deposit is put into an interest-bearing account, we will retain all of the interest. It also discusses if the deposit is held by the owner. It is important to understand that the deposit is returned to the last person who resides at the property. So if residents change in the household, the security deposit is not returned until the last person on this rental agreement vacates. Section 17 talks about non-compliance fees. These are fees that could be charged to you on your second or third offense of these violations, such as a late payment of a utility, not cleaning up your pet waste, failure to clean up garbage in an area other than the dwelling unit, any parking violations, improper use of the vehicles on the property, smoking on the premises, or having an unauthorized pet. If you commit one of these violations, you will be charged $50 for the second offense and $50 plus 5% of your rent on the third and subsequent offenses. The next section discusses joint responsibility, which means that all residents on this agreement are equally responsible for rent and other responsibilities discussed in this lease. Any charges must be paid within 30 days for any maintenance work done that you're responsible for. Any termination notices given by one person is applicable to all residents, and if a resident wishes to stay at the property after the others vacate, they will need to requalify financially and provide us with recent income documentation. On page 4, we start with section 19, which talks about access. This states that when given at least 24 hours notice, you will not withhold access to the property for any periodic inspections or showings if you have given your 30 days notice to vacate. This section also states that in an emergency situation, notice is not necessary. This also allows any yard maintenance to be done without prior notice if included in your rent. Section 20 discusses absences. Basically, you are required to notify us if you are going to be absent from the property for more than 7 days in a row. This is extremely important in case of an emergency situation. Section 21 has to do with legal action. In the event there is a legal dispute, the prevailing party would be reimbursed any legal fees or additional costs of having an attorney. Section 22 talks about locks. You are responsible to report any locks that do not work properly. You are also not allowed to change the locks to the property without prior approval from us. If you do change the locks, you will need to provide us with a copy of the new key. Section 23 goes over renter's insurance, which we discussed earlier on page 2. We require that you provide and maintain renter's insurance for the amount of liability indicated on page 2 of the rental agreement for the entire duration of your lease. We may ask you for proof of this on more than one occasion to make sure that it is still valid. Section 24 goes over conduct and continues on to the top of the middle column. It states that the premises cannot be used for any commercial activity such as daycare. You are responsible for the conduct of yourself and any of your guests, and you need to be conscientious of your neighbors at all times. We enforce quiet hours, which are 7 days a week between 10 p.m. and 7 a.m. You are also not permitted to play in any common areas such as stairwells, hallways, etc., unless specifically allowed by the management. The use and manufacturing of any federally illegal substances, such as marijuana, is prohibited despite the state laws in Oregon. Also, anyone who has been terminated from the premises is not allowed to reside at the property and will be considered trespassing. If any of your guests interfere with the management of the property, you will be issued a non-compliance notice. And this section also prohibits you from entering any potentially dangerous areas such as roofs, attics, or crawl spaces. Section 25 discusses any malfunctions that occur during your tenancy. Basically, if anything at the property stops working, you have an obligation to let us know. You would need to submit a maintenance request through the tenant portal on Buildium, which you would do by clicking Contact Us. Section 26 is about resident losses. This basically indicates that if you experience any loss due to lack of heat or refrigeration caused by something out of our hands, we are not responsible for your loss. The next section goes over any cosigners that are linked to this rental agreement. Their guarantee must remain valid for the duration of your tenancy. Cosigners are not able to retract their cosigner agreements during this lease duration, even if circumstances change and you no longer need them. We would only be able to reevaluate this between lease terms. Section 28 states that if there are any special rules for the property, they would be enforced once this rental agreement is signed. Otherwise, the enclosed addendums would be applied. The next section is about written notices. Basically, in the event we have to send you a written notice, we would do so by first-class mail. Section 30 explains actual notices, which we touched on earlier in regards to entering the property. We will be providing you with actual notice via email, which is indicated on the first page of this rental agreement. We can also do this verbally, leave you a voicemail, a fax, or send this notice through first-class mail. The majority of the time, we will be sending these 24-hour notices via email, so keep that in mind. The top of the last column goes over control of the common areas by stating that the management retains control over any common areas at the property. If we restrict anyone from these areas, you are not allowed to let them into your unit or allow them into these areas. Section 32 covers homeowners association assessments. Basically, if the property has an HOA, you are responsible for paying any fees charged by the HOA for move-in or move-out, and we are required to provide you with any necessary HOA documentation about the rules and regulations of the property if we have that information. Section 33 discusses requests for reasonable accommodations or modifications. If you need a reasonable accommodation, please submit this request and specify the reasons for your request. If necessary, this may also be submitted in writing, but that is not required. The next section talks about termination due to false information or criminal convictions. Basically, if we discover that you have lied about anything or given us incorrect information on your rental application, or if you've been convicted of a crime during your tenancy that we would prohibit, then we could terminate this rental agreement. Section 35 covers reasons for rescreening. This says that if you were to transfer to a different property that we manage or the property changes ownership, we are allowed to rescreen you to make sure that you qualify to live at the property. Section 36 goes over the potential sale of the property. If the property changes ownership during your tenancy, you will look to the new owner for any new rules or regulations, and the new owner would not be responsible for any actions or damages prior to them buying the property. The final section of this rental agreement states that if not stated in any paperwork we are signing here in your lease or addendums, then it does not count, so all parties are relying on the paperwork included in these documents, regardless of any previous agreements or verbal agreements made. So that concludes this video. We hope this has been helpful in understanding your rental agreement. Please feel free to contact us at any time with any questions you may have. We look forward to having you as a resident. Thank you for watching.